Hi, welcome to week 5 of the Coursera course. This week we have our virtual office hour in a unique spot. I'm Jamie Pope, the instructor, and with us again is Heather Bumbalow, who has worked with me on the course and is also a registered dietitian and a recent health coach, just starting this week, a new job. For this virtual office hour, we got rather ambitious and decided that we would, rather than filming in the studio, actually take advantage of some wonderful facilities that Vanderbilt has here at the Vanderbilt Recreation and Wellness Center. This is a center that serves students, that serves faculty and staff, has a fitness facility, does a lot of wellness programming and a host of other things. They also have this new demonstration kitchen that we're getting to use today to prepare a dish for the Plant-Based Diets Week. So we're excited about trying that. Heather and I made a pot ahead of time a couple days ago and got together and practiced and tasted. So today we're going to make a pot live, and then we're also going to make some cornbread to go with it. If we do so, we'll talk about the recipes and some of the things like that. But before we jump in, and Heather, maybe start what we've got going now are some of the ingredients. The recipe is for our folks that are here, and welcome Vanderbilt faculty and staff that are here with us. You have recipe cards in front of you. For the online group, you can find it on a link in the announcement, which went out as an email today. It's also on the course page, so you can access the recipes that way if you're interested in those. And those, of course, will stay available on the course page, so you can get to those anytime. But we've got some of the ingredients going. This is a 3-bean vegetarian pumpkin chili. It's actually a vegan chili.
It is.
Because it really has no animal products in it. So we'll kind of talk through that. The cornbread that we're making is not vegan. It's a whole grain cornbread made with whole wheat flour versus refined flour. But otherwise, it does contain eggs and milk and honey. So those ingredients would not necessarily make it vegan. But for a vegetarian that's lacto-ovo, it would still fit within their plan. So Heather, I'm going to get you to start finishing chopping. We've done a lot of the pre-prep just to save some time. And we've got a host of vegetables here. This is a vegetable-heavy chili. And it also makes use of pumpkin. Now, one thing for our audiences that aren't U.S., in the U.S., it's fall. And here in the South, our leaves are changing, the weather's getting cooler, and when that occurs, people get really into some of the fall vegetables and foliage. And so when we think of fall here, we think of pumpkins and winter squash and all those kind of things. So this chili kind of honors the fall in that it's a pumpkin-based chili that takes advantage of those kind of ingredients. So, and what we've used here too, are primarily canned products, and of course the fresh vegetables, partly for convenience. And if available, as I mentioned in the recipe, try to use the reduced sodium varieties if you can find those. But for the ambitious, it'd be great to, cook your own pumpkin, soak and cook your own beans, all those kind of things, make your own tomato sauce. But for many of us, that's just not an option with full-time jobs and families and such. Of course, some pre-prep can work with that. But that's louder than I thought it would be.
It is. Chopping celery.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about plant-based diets. This week, the videos all focus on, the fundamentals about plant-based diets, the different types of vegetarian diets, ranging from the more flexitarian that include maybe fish and even some meats on occasion, all the way down to a vegan style of eating that eliminates all animal foods. So we talk about the different types of plant-based diets, and then we also talk about some of the nutritional considerations which heighten the stricter quote you get. The more you exclude animal foods, potentially the more you need to be aware. Doesn't mean you can't meet all your nutrient needs with a vegan diet. It just means that sometimes you have to be a little more conscious in terms of how you choose foods and how you eat overall. We also talk about the Mediterranean diet as part of this week, and it's essentially a plant-based diet, even though it would include fish and other type of animal foods. and very rarely red meat in that type diet is also characteristic. We talk about some of the characteristics of populations that live the longest around the world, and one fundamental aspect of that is
the plant-based diets and just exercise and family-oriented.
yes. And a little bit of alcohol too in most of them,
yes.
moderate alcohol. You're not going to see that in the U.S. food guide necessarily, but you do here. So those are just some of the themes from the Plant-Based Diet Week. And one thing I want to make clear too is that we use the term plant-based or plant-centered. And in a recent film I watched, they used the term plant-strong, which I thought was kind of a cool term. And that does not necessarily mean that it completely excludes all animal foods to have a plant-based diet. It just means that you emphasize plant-based foods in your diet. Did you see some of the questions on the discussion forum where people were asking, do you have to go vegan to get the benefits? What are your feelings on that?
I think overall having a plant-based diet is very beneficial, and the more plant-based foods you can add, the better. But I personally am not vegan. I don't know if that fits my lifestyle right now. But I don't think you need to be vegan to be healthy.
Right. And to see many of the benefits. Certainly a vegan style of eating is very healthy, and certainly is strongly plant-based, exclusively plant-based, and with a lot of associated benefits. But you also see benefits from diets that still include a modest or moderate amount of animal foods, as long as the rest of the diet is planned and pretty much plant-based. So, and we talked about that on the discussion forum too, because from people going from a traditional, diet where meals center very much sometimes around the meat item to a more plant-based diet, it would be very difficult for people to completely eliminate. So, just kind of a transitional type thing is probably the better strategy for most people. Can you think of anything else to throw in there about just the plant-based and vegan? And
I can't think of anything right now.
There was another question when you talk about a vegan style of eating. One of the videos lists all the many nutritional considerations, like vitamin B12, for example, is only found in animal foods.
Right.
So people that completely eliminate animal foods do need to either supplement with B12 or use on a regular basis product with B12 so that they're not missing out on that important vitamin. And there's other vitamins too. Someone asked on the discussion forum about iron. And her question was that she was currently eating an animal foods diet, and she said animal foods at virtually every meal, and was taking an iron supplement and was iron deficient. And how would switching to a more plant-based diet and excluding meat affect her iron status? Which was a great question, and one that's really appropriate for her to ask. My concern with her, or my question to her, was if she's eating iron through her diet now, and heme iron, which is more absorbable than the non-heme iron you found in plant, and taking an iron supplement, why is she still iron deficient? That might be something she'd want to talk with her healthcare provider about. The other point too I made to her was that until her iron status is restored, she probably still needs to continue iron supplementation, because diet can go a long way to prevent low iron status or iron deficiency anemia, and it can help maintain healthy iron stores. But you rarely can you restore iron with diet alone. Oftentimes you do need extra supplementation just to bring you back up if you're deficient. So that was a concern. But you can certainly get iron from plant foods. It's not as bioavailable, which is one reason that requirements for iron for vegetarians and vegans is higher than the requirement for iron for people that include animal foods. But your leafy greens, your fortified grains, what are some of the others that are rich in iron?
I think that's most of them. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's a dietitian's fear, is that we can't know it all. And right off the bat, like, what's the sources of this? Legumes, beans, I'm trying to think of some others.
Grains.
Yeah, your grains, your fortified grains are going to be great sources. So all those things can provide iron. But why don't we get the recipe going?
And again, this recipe is the 3-bean vegetarian pumpkin chili.
Yes, and we need to get 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to get the burner started. Okay, so we are cooking here. We've got a pot pre-prepared that Heather and I got together and made this recipe, and so we have a double recipe here that's already prepared. That looks really nice and lots of veggies, but we wanted to do one live. So we're getting the oil heated up. This recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil to start the recipe. And we pre-prep the carrots. Carrots are a little denser vegetable, excuse me, than I don't know, it's not the chili powder, it's something.
Maybe it's onion.
The onion, maybe so. But the carrots are a little denser, so usually you would want to start those first before maybe the onions and peppers. And so we'll get that going. And then I guess we can go ahead and put the celery in.
Yeah. Celery is also a little tough.
Yes. Thank you. So the recipe calls for a cup of carrots, a half a cup of celery. So we got a little extra celery, I think. But that's okay. Can't have too many vegetables. It calls for 1.5 cups of onions, which I will go ahead and just put those in as well, because it'll have time for the carrots to cook. So we're going to saute all these veggies, these beautiful veggies.
And we're doing it in olive oil because olive oil is a great source of healthy fats, specifically the monounsaturated fat, oleic acid. And olive oil has definitely been proven in the Mediterranean diet as great source of healthy fats, and they recommend, I think it's about 2 tablespoons a day of olive oil. And
this is per recipe, but as part of a diet.
A Mediterranean diet, having 2 tablespoons a day to get the health benefits from it.
And as some of the studies show in this week's videos with the Mediterranean diet, diets that include olive oil and nuts that are rich sources of omega-3s are correlated with reduced risk of heart disease and reduced incidence. So including healthy fats. And so sauteing your vegetables in a little bit of healthy fat is a great way to get started. I'm going to turn that up a little bit. We also are using peppers. The recipe calls for a chopped red pepper and green pepper. There's also lots of other color peppers. We have some back here, some yellow, some orange, some red. So we chopped up a little bit of orange pepper as well, just to add a little variety. It's not on the recipe, but you can certainly embellish. That's one thing about this recipe is you can add or take away as might be preferred. Because some of the ingredients you'll see on the recipe say optional. For example, will be a quinoa a little later in the recipe, and it helps thicken, as might bulgur, make it a little thicker. We did have quinoa in the test pot of chili, but that's something if you don't have it on hand, certainly the recipe would work fine without it. Another way to thicken chili, if you like your chili thicker instead of soupier, is refried beans.
Yes.
I often add either a can of, the vegetarian style reduced sodium refried beans, or go ahead and mash my own beans into kind of a puree and then put that into the chili, and it thickens it up. When I make white bean chili, I always mash or puree a portion of the beans just to kind of give it a nice consistency. So you could do that with this one as well. This has a serrano, I guess that's how you say it, pepper. You could also, no, this is a jalapeno, I think.
Jalapeno.
And it called for a whole one. Again, that was optional. Depends on how spicy you might like your chili. We just cut up half a pepper for this one. And I think we had 2 small peppers added to this pot just to add. And peppers are great. Peppers, adds flavorings. Peppers add kind of a heat to a dish, and vitamin C too would be another, ingredient with that. So how are we doing on the red peppers? I think we've got all our veggies in.
This is looking good. A lot of color.
So as soon as we get the red ones in, we will let that cook for a little while. I think it's just to get it kind of translucent. And then we will add some of our liquid ingredients and let it simmer, and then add the beans at the end. in part because canned beans in particular, we rinse those. Some of the varieties are reduced sodium, and we've rinsed them as well, which would reduce some of the sodium, are already cooked, and they can get really mushy if you cook them too long. So we usually put those in at the end. But I don't know, I'll ask Jeff. Can you see the pot with the camera? I was going to hold it up if not.
Zoom in a little bit.
So I just wanted folks to see how colorful all these are, to add all these different veggies. So we're just going to let that cook for a little while. I'm going to turn this up to high. And so our Vanderbilt faculty and staff, do you have any questions so far about the preparation of the chili so far? No? Okay. All right.
Should we let that
Have we gotten any
saute?
questions here?
No.
Not
Yeah,
yet?
as a reminder, if you're with us
Okay.
on Google Plus, you can submit questions and we will try to answer those as we can.
Oh, this is not a very flexible tray. Okay, or too flexible. All right. So there we go.
So as our veggies saute for the chili, we are going to prepare a whole grain cornbread.
I'll let you kind of take the lead on the cornbread, Heather, and I'll help you. Okay. Here we go. Do we have a measure? Oh, our measuring. Do we have another measuring cup?
Yes, right here.
Oh, right here.
That'll work.
Okay. And this
All
is 2
right.
cups.
So for cornbread, first we're going to combine the dry ingredients. And we're going to make a 13 by 9 pan. So that's a pretty good size and great for families or if you're taking it somewhere. But you are welcome to half this recipe, and that would be more appropriate for a smaller family or single use. All right, so 2 cups of whole wheat flour. Now, normally
And
we would.
cornbread may not be a traditional bread in many parts of the world.
That's true.
Certainly in the South, cornbread is something that is eaten with many meals. When you go to a restaurant, they say, "Do you want bread or cornbread?" So it's kind of, and it's sort of something that a lot of people think of as serving along with a chili. So it goes well with a chili dish. I wanted to say a couple things too while Heather's putting that together about the course itself. We are in week 5. We have 2 more weeks of content. Next week is nutrition and fitness. And as part of that week, we will have several of the segments are with a guest lecturer, Dr. Dan Benardot.
Yes.
Who is from Georgia State. And Dr. Benardot is kind of an expert in sports nutrition. He's a PhD. He's written several books on advanced sports nutrition. And even though certainly I could talk about sports nutrition and food and fuel and fitness, he certainly has more expertise than I do. So we invited him to Vanderbilt, and he guest lectured, and we filmed him. And so those are really, people really have had positive comments about those and learned a lot. You don't have to be an athlete to benefit from the information in that week. So there's quite a bit of practical information, and then also information if people are interested in some of the exercise and athletics aspect of nutrition and some of the recommendations for that. Week 7 was added during the second offering. And it is back this third offering, and it is on food allergies and intolerances. And as part of that week, we have Dr. Stacy Doris, who is a pediatric allergist here at Vanderbilt. We did an interview with her, just asking her some specific questions from more the medical perspective. And we also include in week 7 an interview with I think he's a former student. I don't think he's here anymore. Celiac, and therefore has a gluten-free diet, and just about his experiences, about how he manages his lifestyle, how he eats out, how he makes food choices. So hopefully you'll find that beneficial in week 7. Then we will leave the course open 1 more week after that for folks that are interested in obtaining a statement of accomplishment to get assignments and quizzes in. We've given a lot of elbow room in this course, and Heather's been instrumental in helping me keep the course up to date and pull information in and just manage the overall course. But you can really submit assignments or quizzes up until I think it's November 10th. and they can count towards a certificate. So that will be a week after all the content closes, so to speak. But it will, and then even after that, the course is archived and available to anybody that's already enrolled. So you can go back. You just can't submit assignments and quizzes at that point.
And when will the certificates go out?
The certificates we will alert everyone that they're available for download for those that have earned them the week of the 10th. So we will let everybody know that at that point. And it's going to be here before we know it.
Yes.
In terms of interviews, I did want to mention this week, we also feature an interview with Julie Kevdar, who is a former Vanderbilt student. She did this right as she was graduating, and she is a vegan. And has lived the vegan lifestyle, I think, since high school. And so people really have enjoyed Julie's interview and have learned a lot. And Julie's also participating in the discussion forum. So you can watch that too if you're interested and learn about her approach to a vegan diet. I personally, have toyed with different measures of vegetarianism over my career. In graduate school, I was a lacto-ovo vegetarian, in part because a lot of my fellow students were also vegetarian. Only a couple were vegan, but we all kind of were toying with different styles of eating at that point. I prefer to eat plant-based, and if I have an option, I will go with the vegetarian or the plant-based entree. Versus a meat entree, for example, at restaurants. But I do include fish, and I do have, the milks and dairy and things like that. And it's like you mentioned earlier, in terms of my lifestyle right now, that works better. Plus, my cholesterol's great, my blood pressure's great, my weight is healthy, and so I feel like right now it's working for me.
Good.
And keeping all that in line. All right.
So we do have a question about sauteing the vegetables.
Yes.
We were wondering, or one of our audience members was wondering, why is it good to saute vegetables? What's the purpose of it?
Well, the purpose is to kind of soften them. If you just use the raw vegetables, you would have a really crunchy texture in the chili. And if you like that, that's fine. I know that we have a few people in the class that are raw foodists. And that's certainly a choice. Again, I think we talk about it in the videos. Just again, there's some certain considerations for that, and some of the evidence isn't that strong in terms of actually you liberate more vitamin A when you cook vegetables. So it actually can help make those more bioavailable when you don't really lose the nutrition. If you pour off the liquid from boiling, you can lose some, particularly the water soluble. But here, here we're just, we're going to use everything that's cooking up right here. So it's all going to stay right in the pot. I think just more to make it more flavorful.
I agree. Yeah, I think it brings out the flavors, combines the flavors, and softens the vegetables. But let's talk about this cornbread. So I mixed the dry ingredients, which was whole wheat flour, and then we used cornmeal. And we do have a question about the cornmeal. What's the difference between the cornmeal we're using versus the cornmeal we'd normally find on the grocery shelf?
Yeah, we used a stone ground cornmeal. It's just less, what word am I looking for? Refined. Nutritionally, it's you may not lose as many of the B vitamins as you would in a refined cornmeal. So I just I like the texture too of the stone ground, and it's going to retain a little bit more of the nutrition fiber. I'm not even quite sure of the fiber content. 2 grams. Okay, 2 grams for 1/4 a cup. Not super high, but it does have some, and I don't have the regular to compare there.
And the whole wheat flour has 4 grams of fiber per serving. So
per 1/4 a cup.
Yes. So whole wheat flour is generally going to have more fiber, or always going to have more fiber than just the all-purpose white flour that's been processed more. And
yep.
Go ahead. I was going to say, we also mixed in baking powder, and baking powders, it causes the bread to rise. And then we also have salt in here. So this is all the dry ingredients that we mixed up. And now we will add the honey, oil, milk, and eggs. So for the honey, it calls for 1/2 cup of honey.
And again, that's kind of taste. Some people like their cornbread without much sweetness. In tasting, I tested this recipe. It's still not very sweet, even with the half a cup of honey. In terms of honey versus sugar, they both are carbohydrates. They both are simple sugars. And in many ways, your body is not going to necessarily recognize the difference in honey and sugar. Honey, you can often use less because it's more intensely sweet than refined sugar. That natural is kind of a questionable topic all across the board. But this cornbread, go ahead and keep adding. But so she's adding what? How much?
Oil. This is a 1/4 cup of oil. What kind of oil do we use here?
That's an olive.
This is olive oil
because that's all we had. I might have. Oh, another point about olive oil. Now, this is one of those I've been told things is that you should really saute and cook with regular olive oil and reserve the extra virgin olive oil or the virgin olive oil that's lighter in flavor for, dipping, for salad dressings, for things that aren't going to cooking, in part because of the boiling point or the smoke point is a little different. So this is actually regular olive oil we're using here, not the virgin. Not that the virgin wouldn't be fine, but and with the cornbread, one way that I kind of teach my children about food is the sort of always, sometimes, and occasional foods. And this would be more one of those occasional
dishes.
Yes, occasional dishes. Whereas the chili, with all the vegetables and the ingredients, would be something that, you could enjoy often. And it would be very filling because of the vegetables and the fiber with the beans. So you couldn't really overeat too much on it. Okay.
All right.
I'll be quiet.
I added all of the liquid ingredients, which was the 1/2 cup of honey, the 1/4 cup of oil, 2 cups of milk, and 2 eggs. Like we said before, this is considered a vegetarian dish, but not a vegan dish because of the eggs, the milk, and the honey is actually not vegan. That is because it comes from bees, so a type of insect, and vegans avoid products that come from animal sources and insect sources.
Okay. All right. And one interesting thing, when I was looking at cornbread recipes, many called for buttermilk, which is something that we have a lot of in the South, and you maybe in different recipes just to kind of give an acidic content. But this has the baking powder versus the baking soda, so some of the interactions. The other thing with breads like cornbread or quick breads is you do not want to overmix those. You only mix enough to blend. You wouldn't ever want to get your mixer out for cornbread. That it is just really to get it to the point where the eggs are incorporated, the things are incorporated, and that it's just pretty well mixed. Okay. And I'll let you put that in the pan. And I'm going to go ahead.
You might have to help me pour, maybe.
Oh, okay. I'm going to
go
go ahead and add some of the liquid ingredients to the chili.
Okay.
So that we can let that. Oops. We are adding 3 cups of vegetable broth to the chili. And we are adding 1 can of tomato sauce, and hopefully, this is the diced tomatoes. 1 can of diced tomatoes, 1 can of hopefully lower sodium. This one is tomato sauce. And then the unique ingredient for many people would be a can of pumpkin, which really enhances the flavor and even the texture, gives it a little more thickening. Adds a little bit of sweetness. This may be a sweeter chili, although you have a combination of the chili powder, so you kind of have a variety of tastes going on. I wish our Coursera audience could taste it, but our Vandy folks get to
smell it.
And we got plenty. So no one will leave hungry, hopefully. And we've got cornbread already made to taste as well. And I have that upper oven preheated.
Yes.
The chili cooks for about 20 minutes. So it cooks pretty quickly. Oh, at 375. You may have to actually, I think I have it on at 350. But the recipe calls for 375. So I'm going to kind of lift this. Can folks see just kind of the consistency now with the tomatoes and the broths added?
You can also see I spread the cornbread in a greased or lightly oiled pan, and it will bake at 375 for about 20 to 35 minutes. So
Do you know what we
I'll go
forgot
ahead.
to put in was garlic.
Oh,
We forgot to
yes.
saute our garlic. I'm
But I
just
think the
going to
flavors
dump it
will-
right in.
Yes, flavors.
It's
will
already
mix.
minced and it's already, so we minced some garlic because you cannot have chili without garlic. So that was something we forgot to put in with the veggies. The recipe also calls for 1/2 cup of quinoa. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this is optional. And all right. There we go, about 1/2 cup. And again, I know I'm talking in US measures and that most of the world is not US measures, are metric. We do have a metric conversion tab on the course page to convert cups and some of the things we talk about in terms of US measures into metric measures. And I should have included that on the recipe. So this quinoa, as it cooks, will help thicken the chili. The longer it cooks, really the more thickening attribute it will provide to the chili. And then we've got to add the spices. So the different spices include, what all do we have here? 2 tablespoons of chili powder, which to me, you can't have too much chili powder.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of a traditional blend of paprika and I guess cayenne. Whoop. All right, there we go.
And then next is 2 tablespoons of cumin.
Is it two
Two
2 teaspoons?
teaspoons.
Yes. You don't want to overdo on the,
That's teaspoons.
cumin.
And then also 2 teaspoons of cinnamon.
okay.
Um,
The cinnamon, and again, this is to taste. If you're not a huge cumin fan, you might just put 1 teaspoon of cumin. And again, on the cinnamon, my husband is not real fond of the cinnamon taste in the chili, but I didn't make it for him this time. So I would only have used 1 teaspoon of the cinnamon for that.
There's cinnamon. And I think cinnamon's a great
Should we
spice
use-
that goes with the pumpkin.
Should we go with the 2 or go with the, whoop? I'm going to do just a heaping 1.
Yes, heaping 1.
Okay, on this one. And then,
This just shows how flexible recipes are. You can add
Yes.
to your taste buds.
and I didn't add added salt to this recipe. Again, that would be to taste, but most of us kind of overdo on sodium. Regular canned foods without any reduced sodium and added salt, this could get pretty high. I think on the recipe I said anywhere from 400 to 800 milligrams per serving, dependent on not necessarily adding any salt, but just using regular varieties of canned foods. So just to kind of moderate the sodium, we didn't add any to this recipe, but again, that could be personal taste. And then this also has a little balsamic vinegar. A chili I make from childhood has vinegar and a little bit of brown sugar in it. And that could even be an option here. We didn't add that to this one. How much?
1 tablespoon of vinegar.
And this is a balsamic. You could use a white vinegar as well.
Could you use any type, like apple cider vinegar?
Apple cider vinegar would be pretty good,
I feel
I
like
think.
that's a good fall one to mix with the pumpkin
Yes,
and cinnamon.
because balsamic's a little stronger flavor. Got it on my balsamic vinegar. So I think everything's in
Yeah,
except
so-
beans.
So this is supposed to simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes.
And I will tilt it up again for Jeff, our videographer, to see just what it's looking like here. So it's a pretty chili with a lot of color. You'll see at the end of the recipe, and I didn't bring that with me today, you can also add corn to the recipe, whether it be the white shoe peg corn, which is the smaller white corn, or whole corn or whole kernel corn. We do have corn in the test recipe, but we're not adding it to the one we're demonstrating today.
All
So
right,
that's about it on
yeah,
this.
as that simmers, we have some questions that
Oh,
come
good,
in that we
good.
can answer. So Brian from our Coursera audience, he has asked, what resources would you suggest for people to start with to learn how to cook everyday healthy vegetarian meals?
Oh, that's great.
So what resources?
Well, there are a lot of cookbooks,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure where
Yes.
Brian's from, but you can just even Google or go on to Amazon here in the US and put in vegetarian cookbook and browse through. I have a fun cookbook that I bought called Betty Goes Vegan,
Okay.
because Betty Crocker is kind of a mainstay cookbook in the US with little red and white checks, and this is called Betty Goes Vegan. I don't think it's put out by the same group, but it's a host of vegan recipes. I have a lot of vegetarian and vegan cookbooks.
Mm-hmm.
You can also subscribe to vegetarian type publications like
Mhm.
Vegetarian Times, and there's others too that send you recipes every month. And in fact, I prefer magazines over cookbooks because I find I buy a cookbook, I look through it, put it on the shelf, and then I just don't get it off very often. But when I get, for example, Cooking Light
Uh-huh.
or some of the other magazines every month, I'll look through them, I'll tear out recipes. I'm more apt to use those.
Yeah, it's like a monthly
Yes,
reminder.
yes.
And all the good pictures.
So, and there's
Right.
lots of websites. We have some of the
Mhm.
websites listed for the course in terms of the Vegetarian Resource Group that will give you some tips and plans too on ways
Yeah.
of stocking, say, a vegan or a vegetarian kitchen,
Mhm.
and how you transition your diet. And of course, there's some meat analogs, or kind of like ways you can say, if you love burgers, that you can have veggie burgers,
Mhm.
or a black bean burger, and you're increasingly seeing those as an option in many restaurants now too.
Yes. And another idea is to look up different apps. If you have a
Oh, that's a
mobile
great
tablet
idea.
or a phone, there's so many apps out there on just nutrition or recipes, vegan recipes, vegetarian recipes, and they often come with pictures and videos of every step of the process. So that's very helpful.
That's a fabulous idea. I forget about the apps. You're younger than me, so you're the app generation.
All right. So another question from our Coursera audience: when is the best way to add herbs and spices to your cooking? Does it influence the good things content in your dish somehow? So I guess the timing of adding herbs. How do you know when to add them?
I just add them.
Follow the recipe.
Yeah, I would not necessarily add them when I was sautéing. I added them more to the liquid ingredients.
Yeah, liquid disperses them.
And to let them blend, to simmer,
Mhm.
to allow the spices to blend and complement one another. I was going to say this earlier, dietitians are not chefs.
Right.
If we cook, it's more of our personal experience that we're not necessarily trained, at least I wasn't, in culinary skills.
Mhm.
So oftentimes people assume because you're a dietitian that you know all about cooking and food preparation, and you know some, but you're not certainly like a culinary expert as a certified chef would be.
Mhm.
And I've loved working with chefs before.
Yes.
In terms of just their inventiveness and some of the things they can do with recipes.
Yeah, I think it's really a science. And
It is a science.
I recently finished my dietetics degree in school, and we did have some cooking classes and food science, which we were in a kitchen more to be used as a lab. So we're learning how the foods, like each ingredient of the food, like what's its purpose and how they influence other ingredients.
So what would you recommend in terms of spices and herbs, and how they affect, when to add them and how they affect?
Yeah, I agree, adding them with the liquids, because that disperses the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like as you saute, I usually like to sprinkle maybe garlic powder, something on vegetables as I saute them.
Particularly if you're not going to be adding a liquid or a sauce that you can add
Mhm.
later on.
Is it possible to influence hormone balance with foods, herbs, and spices? The student has heard something about ginger helping your hormones, and it might cause unhealthy eating.
That's a tough one.
So
I mean,
spices and
foods,
hormones.
your diet, I don't know so much of individual foods, but your diet overall certainly affects your overall health, you know, your bodily functions, and like balances of even the macronutrients in terms of neurotransmitters and such. An iodine deficiency, for example, would dramatically affect thyroid hormone and the function of your thyroid gland. So, you know, that's definitely a direct one. In terms of ginger's exact role, I'm not sure. I hadn't heard of the hormonal.
There's been research in terms of like helping limit nausea and things like that.
Yes.
So I think that's just the area where there needs to be continued research.
In week 3, we had dietary supplements, and folks research, and certainly ginger was one that some folks look into because it's used sometimes as a dietary supplement, as in addition to being a flavoring or seasoning. And there's lots to know. It's hard to keep up with what all the potential roles, functions, applications that supplements and even seasonings and herbs add. What other kind of questions are we getting?
Just about this course in general. We're doing a diet. Will there be any advantage or like a license to use our knowledge gained in this course with our clients? And if we become a diet consultant or fitness trainer, can we show this course from Vanderbilt?
I think having a certificate of completion, particularly if it's Signature Track, which verifies that actually you were the one that completed the course, can be beneficial. It doesn't really give you any kind of certification in nutrition. This is very much an intro-level nutrition course. In fact, it wouldn't even count as continuing education for dietitians because it would be very basic core knowledge. So it wouldn't really prepare you to be a nutrition professional. It certainly can give you some valuable information and hopefully all the resources and links and analysis of the data, the evidence could help support things, but it's not going to necessarily the criterion. And I wouldn't want people to use it that way, to say, because I took this course, I'm a nutrition expert, because if anything, I hope the course shows you how hard it is to keep up in the field of nutrition and how to know what you need to know. I mean, I learn things every day. When I open my news list from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that give headlines, studies coming out, something new each and every day. And, everything comes out all the time. So, and one thing registered dietitians and nutrition professionals are trained with is some of the core science, so that we know how to understand the body's functioning, we understand how things react, and yet still, we're learning as well. But I don't know if that fully answers that question. Heather is serving as a health coach right now, and she's a registered dietitian. So you are able to use your background.
Nutrition background, but also coach lifestyle behaviors on physical activity and stress management, smoking cessation. So a wide variety of the health aspect. So
I was wondering, in terms of your health coaching, I know some of the health coaches, you can be a certified health coach with other backgrounds, with, say, an exercise physiology background, a counseling psychology background. How do those individuals that don't have necessarily specific training in diet address some of the diet questions with their clients?
Right. Whichever company they're working for, they get proper training, and through that training, they'll learn about each of these topics. And then they can also go on to take certifications through well-known national organizations, so that they have to study, they learn the material, and then take that exam to get the certification.
And I would imagine a resource to one another, because you're working with all sorts of health coaches, and you can teach and learn and ask one another some of the others. I think we're ready for the beans.
Yes. All right, so this is simmered. It didn't simmer exactly 20 minutes, but since we have limited time, we can go ahead and add the beans, and I'll have to keep an eye on our cornbread too. So
I guess if we have some folks, we could go ahead and start serving up for our other audience members. Sorry, we can't serve you Coursera folks, but we can serve others. And you can have more than a little cup you can come back for seconds and thirds if you like. Hopefully you like it. Okay.
All
So
right.
tell us what we're adding.
All right, so we decided to use 3 different types of beans for this recipe. And as mentioned during the video lectures, beans are a great source of protein, also fiber. And with the beans, we've talked about
Also iron.
Yes.
Non-heme iron, yes.
And we've talked about complementary proteins. And by mixing beans with, let's say, our quinoa in this dish, they have different types of amino acids in them, which complement each other, and our body needs essential amino acids. So by getting amino acids or protein from both of these sources, then our body will have all the necessary protein we need without having to eat meat sources and animal sources.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that I clarified both in an announcement and on the course page, because I think that people could maybe misconstrue or misinterpret that you have to eat those foods at the same time.
Right.
That definitely grains and legumes or beans complement one another in terms of their spectrum. So she's added black beans.
Yes, black beans. And these are Great Northern beans, so white beans.
Or cannellini, we were trying to make sure we were saying
correctly.
correctly.
Pronounce it. I like how these all give different colors to the chili too.
It's very colorful, which is great for fall too.
And these are
although I know
beans.
it's not fall everywhere, but
yeah.
That's been one thing I've really learned in doing both preparing and teaching the Coursera courses, is an appreciation that not everybody is, number one, American, and not everyone is at fall where you are. Different time zones, different seasons around the world. So, but this is so I will turn it a little so Jeff can see into the pot how colorful, yummy this is.
I can tell the quinoa, when quinoa cooks, it sort of expands and has more translucent look to it. So it's like a circular shaped grain, but when it's cooked, it expands a little bit, sort of like bursts, and sort of like a circular green that's translucent.
This is looking good. Looking very good. I wanted to go back what I was saying. You don't necessarily have to combine proteins at the exact same time. As long as you're eating a varied diet over time, you're fine. Your body's going to be able to assimilate proteins from the spectrum of essential amino acids it's getting across all the foods. Plant foods typically do not contain all essential amino acids. All animal foods do. However, there are some exceptions. Soy is a complete protein. Quinoa, actually in and of itself, is a complete protein. Can also serve as a grain, but also combining the beans with the corn and the flour, the whole wheat flour, also creates a complete protein. But you don't have to combine at the exact same time for your body to be able to meet its protein needs. And you know, very rarely do even people on a vegan diet not meet their protein needs unless they're restricting calories. If your calories are too low, then it is difficult. But with enough calories and enough variety and balance, you're going to do fine with that. So any other questions?
Well, one from Jacqueline was about commenting on a diet mainly of protein, like chicken, fish, vegetables, and fruit. So I don't know if she's referring to having a diet that's just high in protein.
Or animal foods.
And chicken, fish.
You know,
fruits.
There's definitely different styles of eating. More of a high protein, probably low carb type diet. And definitely in the short run, you know, those can help with weight loss, as can any kind of calorically restricted diet. Long term, probably the plant-based diet evidence is much stronger than it is for a high protein diet. But I know we have our advocates and believers in, you know, the higher protein content. And some people benefit from additional protein, particularly if they're actively trying to lose weight, or if certain types of athletes may benefit from a little. But most people, particularly here in the US, we get plenty of protein.
Right.
Usually often double the amount that we, quote, our requirements might be. I wanted to ask, does anybody in the Vandy group have questions for us? Anybody have a question or no? Yes.
I've seen at grocery stores agave which is some kind of sweetener,
Yes.
something like that. And that's something that you can use on recipes instead of.
You could use, you're talking about agave syrup,
Yeah.
which is an alternative sweetener. It's not low calorie. It's not a reduced sweetener. It's a syrup. Now, one thing, it's actually higher in fructose than even table sugar or honey would be. Its percent of fructose is higher. So I wouldn't necessarily use a lot of that. It's intensely sweet, so you can use just a little, but its proportion of fructose is higher versus the glucose content. Doesn't make it bad. And again, just a moderate, but it's one of those things that kind of you hear about, like, oh, this is good, this is healthy and natural. And, you know, again, moderation, but I actually would feel like it would be less beneficial to, say, substitute agave for the honey. Honey, you know, not that honey's super healthy either. It's just giving a little sweetening to the cornbread. And, you know, but there are many types of sweeteners. So, but that's a great question. That's a great question. Any other questions from our studio audience? Okay. How are we doing on time?
We have about 5 more minutes.
Okay. This is cooking up real nice. I'm going to turn it down a little.
What about, we do
I'm
have
going to check our cornbread. You go
I
ahead.
think it's almost done, and I set the. So we do have a question about
A little bit
from
more.
Cheryl from our Coursera audience asking about diabetes and protein. So she's a type 2 diabetic, and she finds that if she eats 3 ounces of protein at a meal, she's less likely to overeat later. She's saying that protein helps keep her stomach full for longer, and her doctor didn't want her to be vegan because protein helps stabilize blood sugar. So I know that protein, it triggers the body's response to help like ward off your hunger. So by eating protein, it is going to keep you full for longer.
And actually, you know, we used to think that fat was the most satiating, which means satisfying. Like satiation refers to that sense of fullness during a meal, and kind of like when you want to stop, you're satiated.
Yes.
And we used to think fat was the most satiating nutrient. But now we know protein is the most satiating nutrient. And so, you know, again, a dish like this is going to have, with all the beans and all these, and the quinoa, this dish has 11 grams of protein in it. So
how big is a serving?
Yeah.
For that?
It's a cup serving.
Okay.
Cup serving.
Bowl.
So, and just 240 calories. So, you know, a good percentage of the calories are actually coming from protein. But lean protein, if you know, with animal foods, you know, the lean proteins, the chickens, the, you know, the fish, the leaner sources of protein in a meal. And she's wise. She's saying just 3 ounces, which many people consume markedly more. That's about the size of a deck of cards.
Or size of your palm.
Yes.
I've also heard like a checkbook
Yes.
size for a serving of protein. That's 3 ounces.
And when you look at some of the food guides, they're counting a protein as a 2-ounce serving is considered. And very few people eat just a 2-ounce serving. So, you know, having that with your meal with lots of other vegetables and things would, you know, be acceptable, certainly.
But what about being a vegan while having diabetes? I think that's fine as long as you're getting enough of that protein to help keep you full, like you mentioned, or stabilize your blood sugar.
And working with a nutrition professional, you know, particularly if you're insulin dependent, to, you know, to balance out your carbohydrate content. Because with plant-based diets, you know, you are going to have more carb potentially. So, you know, working with how that affects blood sugar and how, you know, to distribute it across meals and snacks, and the source of the carbohydrate, the ones that would have the lower glycemic index, that wouldn't increase your blood sugar so rapidly. And many of these are that type of protein.
Yes.
I mean, of carbohydrate source.
All right. Another question is, what's the difference between soybean chunks and whole soybeans? Do they have a similar nutrition profile? So this could maybe even be, tofu is made of soy, so maybe using tofu versus using like edamame or actual whole soybeans.
I'll let you field that one. That's what I'm
Okay.
thinking she's talking about, or they're talking
The
about
chunks.
the tofu chunks or block of tofu versus the
Mhm.
whole beans. Well, the tofu is made from the soybeans.
Right.
It's going to have a little higher liquid content, but I'm not sure how to describe the difference. I think they would both still be complete proteins.
Yeah, I think they're both still
Oh,
complete
definitely.
proteins. Do
Still,
you think the whole soybean itself might have more fiber though?
potentially.
So that could be a
Potentially. I'm not
extra
exactly
benefit.
sure of the
Yeah, I'd have to
process by
look.
which tofu is made. So
Mhm.
what is stripped away or not. But
Yeah.
those are great questions. Those
Good
are great
question.
questions. I did want to mention that we will have another virtual meetup in 2 weeks during week 7. It'll be our last week and our last meetup. So we will be doing that again. And from the studio, guys, for the ones that hauled equipment here and did all that, we will filming that from the studio next time. All right. How's the cornbread?
What do you think? A little while longer?
A
or we
little
can
bit
at least-
longer.
should we
Just
show
a
it
little
at
bit.
least
Yes. Oh,
before
you
we
can show it.
finish up?
Yes. We'll put it back in and
All right. So our whole grain cornbread that we made a 13 by 9 pan. And as you can see here, we might leave it in the oven a little while longer so it gets more golden brown. But it goes great with chili, especially this pumpkin chili, I think.
the serving size is 1/16 of this on the recipe card or on the online recipe. I cut up a pan just to sample into literally 55 little
pieces.
squares. So, you can cut it differently to moderate the portion size too.
All right.
Okay.
I'll put this back in the oven to finish, and I think
All
we're
right.
about out of time.
Well, I want to thank the Coursera audience for joining us and being with us today. And please, you can submit questions on the discussion forum. It's certainly a lively spot. We get in there as often as we can. 2 more weeks after this week. I hope that you've enjoyed the course and have benefited from the course, and that it's taught you an appreciation for nutrition and just some of the ways you can explore nutrition, and and that it's not a necessarily concrete science, that there's different perspectives and new research, and even among researchers there's often differences in how we apply nutrition. So we're all learning. So thank you again, and hope you enjoy and make some of this yummy pumpkin chili.